Today, the small town of Baia was witnessing an event that had never happened in its 107 years of existence. You, viewers, are about to become a part of this history-making moment. On the shoulders of two groups of 4 men were 2 coffins. In these caskets were 2 bodies that had brought the town to a standstill. Bereaved was the town, so silent that you could hear the footsteps of those marching to the cemetery from miles away. This silence was so deafening, and the only thing you could hear apart from the men's footsteps was the wind whistling, singing a dirge for the lives the town had lost. Because this wasn't a funeral of a life well spent, but a case of 2 people gone too soon, and the day would become even more troubling when they would start digging the graves to bury their dead. When the first person heard voices from the gravesite next to their freshly dug hole, he thought his mind was playing tricks on him. But when other people heard the same muffled screams, some of them started backpedaling, while others approached the gravestone to confirm what they were hearing. Could they be hearing ghosts? It is a cemetery, after all. Should they be running for their lives, or should they be investigating what they had just heard? Or would the burial of Ari and Ava be where their own lives would end? And for you to understand this story, I have to tell you about Ari and Ava. The twins are the daughters of Nina and her husband Rico. The young couple had been trying for a child for about 2 years before she finally got pregnant. When they went for an MRI scan, they found out they were going to have a baby girl. The couple's joy knew no bounds. Initially, Nina had not felt any discomfort during the pregnancy, but as the pregnancy grew, there was a lot of vomiting, fatigue, and the lack of appetite. It became harder and harder for her to get out of bed. She went to see the doctor and was told to be on bed rest. The pregnancy became so difficult that everyone became worried. A few months later, she gave birth. When she went for a scan, they told her it was only 1 girl she was going to have, but on the delivery day, she gave birth to 2 girls instead. Nina and Rico were not wealthy, but they were ready to do everything within their means to take care of their baby girls. They named them Ari and Ava. After giving birth to the twins, Nina was unable to conceive again. They tried, but all to no avail. The husband and wife accepted their fate and chose to take care of their girls. Ari and Ava grew up nicely. They were beautiful girls and full of life and joy. Their mother was very proud of them and took them along wherever she went. Soon enough, the 2 girls became quite popular in town, and everyone in the town loved them. Ari had been born with a health condition, asthma, that was being managed by her parents. They didn't have access to standard health care, and they did all they could to keep her healthy. Ava had no health condition, and she was the calmer one. As they grew older, their parents felt more at ease leaving them at home to play with the neighbors any time they had to go out. They trusted that the twins would always be there for each other. However, a few days before the twins turned 9 years old, calamity struck. The parents had left them at home as usual, but when they got home, instead of 2 girls running to greet them, they found a lot of people standing in front of their house. As soon as the people saw the parents, somebody rushed to hold them and lead them in. On getting in, they couldn't believe their eyes. Their girls were lying on the floor, dead. Nina screamed and fainted in shock. It took a while to revive her. Her husband Rico couldn't say a word, he just stared at the children's corpses in disbelief. Earlier that day, Ari and Ava had been seen playing with their friends. Ava had gone home after a while, saying she had to drink water. After a long while, when Ari didn't see her sister return, she went in to check on her sister. On getting home, she found her sister lying on the floor, out of breath. She rushed to get her sister water, but nothing improved. Ari went outside to find an adult, but nobody was close. The young girl remembered that her mom mentioned that a nurse lived about 3 streets away, so she ran as fast as her feet could carry her in search of the nurse. But on getting there, she was told the nurse wasn't around. Left with no other choice, she told the adults she met at the nurse's place what had happened to her sister, and they all ran back to their house. Her sister had died before she returned, and because of the shock and all the running, Ari had an attack. Everyone thought Ari was crying and clutching at her chest because of her sister's death, so they kept consoling her, not knowing she needed her inhaler. She tried talking, but it was so hard for her to do so when she started wheezing and gasping for breath. They suspected that something was wrong and tried taking her to the hospital. She died on the way. Their neighbors and friends had tried reaching the parents when the incident occurred, but they were not available. Nina and Rico just couldn't believe what had happened. Nina remained silent and sat in between her children's corpses, holding each of their hands. The norm in the town was that whenever a child dies, the child would not be buried by the parents. Members of the town helped bury the child instead, and that was what was done for the twins the next day. Several men were chosen to take the children's corpses to the town cemetery to have them buried. On getting to the cemetery, they were told that there was no space for the twins. They had no choice but to bury them next to their grandfather, who had been buried on land he acquired on the outskirts of the town. While digging the graves, they stumbled upon the grandfather's coffin. They planned to cover up the grandfather's coffin after burying the girls, but they started hearing strange sounds coming from the coffin. Worried that an animal was digging from the other side of the coffin, they decided to bring out the coffin. After they brought out the coffin, they found out that the sound was coming from inside the coffin. When the coffin was opened, they all couldn't believe what they saw. A young man who was very much alive was found inside the coffin. His hands and legs had been tied, and his mouth gagged to prevent sounds. They quickly untied him and gave him water. The young man was not sure how long he had been in the grave, because time had seemed slower to him there. He told the people how he had gotten buried alive. He had been working as a driver for a candy-making factory for several years. All he had to do each day was to drive a loaded truck to a particular place at a certain time of the day and pick it up another time. He didn't know what was inside the bus, and he never bothered to ask. One day he got to the factory earlier than usual and saw them taking several boxes into the truck he drove. He volunteered to help them with the boxes, but they vehemently refused. And that was what got him curious. One particular day he broke the padlock on the doors of the truck and found out what was so special that they didn't want him to know about it. In the boxes he found several boxes of different hard drugs and various weapons. He became very afraid. After all, he couldn't just drop off the truck because he had tampered with the padlock on the doors. After several minutes of contemplation, he decided to act like he hadn't seen anything. He dropped off the truck as usual and went straight to the factory to tender his resignation letter. But that was a very wrong move. His employers were suspicious, and when they found out about the broken padlock in the truck, their fears were confirmed. They knew they had to prevent him from telling people what he had seen, or even worse, the police. On his way out one day, he was attacked by several men. They tied his hands and feet, gagged them, and dumped him in the car's boot. They had been ordered to kill him and get rid of his body, but they decided to be more creative. They dug up an existing grave, took out the body in it, and buried him inside alive. The last thing the young guy remembered was the man digging up the grave. He fell unconscious and woke up to find himself in the grave. The people who heard the story were horrified. They couldn't believe that such bad people were in their town. They decided to help nurture him to good health and find the means of getting him out of town to keep him safe. It was quite sad that they had to come to bury their children, but very fortunate that they did to help keep a man alive.